Welcome to No Longer Conformed. I'm Erik Garthe, and we are studying You Are Secure. Know Who You Are in Christ, Part 2, based on the book Your Identity in Christ by Neil T. Anderson. In this session, we'll be looking at Philippians chapter 1, verses 3 to 7. Know that God will perfect you. Let's look at our text, beginning at with Philippians chapter 1, verse 3. I thank my God upon every remembrance of you, always in every prayer of mine, making requests for you, all with joy, for your fellowship in the gospel from the first day until now, being confident of this very thing, that he who has begun a good work in you will complete it until the day of Jesus Christ. Just as is right for me to think this of you, because I have you in my heart, inasmuch as both in my chains and in the defense and confirmation of the gospel, you all are partakers with me of grace. How do you view individual events in your life? We have unpleasant experiences, and we're tempted to tell God he's ruining everything. At those times, we will find greater strength and peace when we acknowledge God's perfection and trust him for the finished product. In our text, Paul is reflecting on his prayers for the Philippian Christians as he writes. He's prompted to thank God for the fellowship they enjoyed and for the reality of their salvation. Verse 5, in the gospel. Verse 6, begun a good work. Verse 7, partakers with me of grace. And again in verse 6, being confident of this very thing, that he who has begun a good work in you will complete it until the day of Jesus Christ. God's work of grace. The apostle prays with confidence. Confidence based on what? His confidence is in God. God began it, and God will complete it. There are two matters to look at in this verse. One, the nature of God's work in the believer, and the length of God's commitment to the believer. The miracle of the church is human agency and divine initiative as co-workers. God began and God will complete, and he does it with men. We see the entire salvation process of regeneration, spiritual growth, and eternal life. Again, Philippians 2, verse 12. Therefore, my beloved, as you have always obeyed, not as in my presence only, but now much more in my absence, work out your own salvation with fear and trembling. Listen, he who has begun a good work in you will complete it until the day of Jesus Christ. In between, God is working on the project. The day of the Lord equals the return of the Lord. How did the apostle view Christ's return? Well, Philippians chapter 1, verse 10. That you may approve the things that are excellent, that you may be sincere and without offense, till the day of Christ. 1 Thessalonians chapter 5, verse 2. For you yourselves know perfectly that the day of the Lord so comes as a thief in the night. But you, brethren, are not in darkness, so that this day should overtake you as a thief. And then 2 Thessalonians chapter 1, verse 10. When he comes in that day to be glorified in his saints and to be admired among all those who believe, because our testimony among you was believed. 2 Thessalonians chapter 2 and verse 2. Not to be soon shaken in mind or troubled, either by spirit or by word or by letter, as if from us, as though the day of Christ had come. 1 Corinthians chapter 1, verse 8. Who will also confirm you to the end, that you may be blameless in the day of our Lord Jesus Christ. 1 Corinthians chapter 3, verse 13. Each one's work will become clear, for the day will declare it, because it will be revealed by fire, and the fire will test each one's work of what sort it is. 2 Corinthians chapter 1, verse 14. As also you have understood us in part, that we are your boast, as you also are ours in the day of the Lord. And then Romans chapter 13 and verse 12. The night is far spent, the day is at hand. Therefore, let us cast off the works of darkness and let us put on the armor of light. Paul was confident of Jesus Christ's promised return. God always completes the work he begins. 2 Corinthians chapter 7, verse 4, and then verse 16. Great is my boldness of speech toward you. Great is my boasting on your behalf. I am filled with comfort. I am exceedingly joyful in all our tribulation. Then verse 16. Therefore I rejoice that I have confidence in you in everything. It's incredible. This is Corinth. Paul is talking about here. He is referring to that church of dissension, immorality, and carnality. How can he say these things? Well, he can say them because of a biblical principle that you need to learn well. God finishes his work. Matthew chapter 8, look at it. Verse 23 down to verse 27. Now when he got into a boat, his disciples followed him. And suddenly a great tempest arose on the sea, so that the boat was covered with the waves. But he was asleep. Then his disciples came to him and awoke him, saying, Lord, save us, we're perishing. But he said to them, why are you fearful, O you of little faith? Then he arose and rebuked the winds of the sea, and there was a great calm. So the men marveled, saying, who can this be, that even the winds and the sea obey him? There was absolutely no way that boat could sink with Jesus in it. Let me ask you, are there storms raging in your life? You will make it to the other side because Jesus is in your boat. Look at another encounter in Mark chapter 6, verse 45. Immediately he made his disciples get into the boat and go before him to the other side, to Bethsaida, while he sent the multitude away. And when he had sent them away, he departed to the mountain to pray. Now when evening came, the boat was in the middle of the sea, and he was alone on the land. Then he saw them straining at rowing, for the wind was against them. Now about the fourth watch of the night, he came to them, walking on the sea, and would have passed them by. And when they saw him walking on the sea, they supposed it was a ghost and cried out. For they all saw him and were troubled. But immediately he talked with them and said to them, be of good cheer, it is I, do not be afraid. When he went up into the boat to them, the wind ceased, and they were greatly amazed in themselves beyond measure and marveled. Jesus intended to pass them by. Why? He always passes by the self-sufficient. He saw them straining at rowing, for the wind was against them. If we think that getting to the other side of our problems depends on how hard we row, we may never get there. Don't forget who began the good work in you and who will complete it. Well, what about you? Are you rowing against the winds of life? Is a storm trying to sink your boat? Have you experienced failure in the past? Do you sometimes feel like God has given up on you? Well, look at Philippians chapter 3, verses 12 down to verse 14. Not that I've already attained or am already perfected, but I press on that I may lay hold of that for which Christ Jesus has laid hold of me. Brethren, I do not count myself as having to have apprehended, But one thing I do, forgetting those things which are behind and reaching forward to those things which are ahead, I press toward the goal for the prize of the upward call of God in Christ Jesus. Stop struggling and trust in the Lord's strength. What do you need him to do? What do you need to